Hello, I'm Angela, back at Craft Academy again. Welcome. Join me for another crafting idea. Now, one of the things that's really fashionable at the moment is wall art, using lettering and burlap frames. And I've got one behind me which has got the word love. And I've done this one with white acrylic paint and it's on the square burlap. But I thought that looks nice and it is fashionable, but it's pretty expected. So I thought I'd extend it, how to make these a bit more interesting. And I quite like the idea of using either fabrics and paints, and you could actually theme these to your home. So this one I've done with some really cute pink and turquoise lettering paper, and I've stuck it on top of the wooden frame that I've used acrylic paints to get this effect. So I thought I would show you how easy this is to do, and obviously you can personalise, your home colours, but I quite like the idea of the floral one. So the first thing I did was I took a wooden letter, put it onto the piece of paper, and I used it as a stencil. So just drew around it, so I had got the paper with the O sign on it. Then I've cut out the middle, as you do, but I just wanted to show you this bit because I want the outside to be red, but I want the inside of the paper to be inside that red. So when you've drawn around the frame, the next thing is make sure that you cut inside that line for probably about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So I'm not actually cutting on the line that I drew, I'm cutting inside it. And that way I'm going to get the paint that I've got around the edges showing through, and I think it's quite nice paper actually. I really like this. It's got a little bit of gold in this. I might edge this one in gold actually. That would be quite interesting. I wonder what that would look like. Might do both. The nice thing is that you can get creative with these letters in so many different ways. You can 3D them. I could put extra flowers on top. I could decoupage some flowers on top if I wanted to. But I'm just going to cut all the way around there. And you can see I'm not really being too fussy. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to have the paint to distress it around. So I've got the shape. I'll move the paper to the side because I don't need that. But even that on its own, let's sort of get an idea of where that would sit. And that's my burlap frame. You get an idea. Ooh, that looks nice even on its own. That would look nice even just with some gold around the edges. But being me, I'm going to have a little bit of play with some paint because I quite like the idea of giving some depth to it. So I've put in my little tray here, I've put some red acrylic paint, but because the red's a bit bright, I'm mixing a bit of black in with it as well, and it gives me a deeper look. And then sort of real rich colour, but I'm a tiny bit of white in there, because this is still a bit of a girly paper, and I'm feeling a bit girly today. So a tiny bit white in there, and so I'm going to get, that's quite an interesting colour. You see how the black really does give that a more interesting colour. Oh, I like that, happy days. So I find one of the best ways of using acrylic paint on projects is actually just a kitchen sponge, and I chop it into different sizes depending how much paint I want to use, but I want to go all the way around the edges. Now, the back of my letter is going to have adhesive on it, so I don't need to paint the back. So I'm just going to put the paint around all the edges that are going to show. And because it's acrylic paint, what's great is it goes on so well onto these letters. These are MDF wood letters, and they're nicely made, but they're perfect for these acrylic paints. And I only need to cover the edges that are going to show. So around I go. I'm not being too fussy or too worried. And then I'm going to do the same on the inside of the O. And you can see they're almost dried straight away. It's amazing how quickly the paint dries on this project. You only need to use one coat. Well, I find one coat is enough. So round I go. Again, don't have to be too fussy. And I've coated all the edges, because the edges are going to be seen, remember. Job done. So I'm going to just put that to the side now, and I'm going to get going on my adhesive, because I need to have adhesive on my O, on my letter to stick it. So I'm going to take some adhesive, just going to squeeze a bit onto here. Oops, help if I undid it. Oh, have I got a block? I think I'll take the lid off. When you get a blockage, take the lid off. Perfect. Come on. Out it comes nice. Nice, nice, nice. I'm going to have to unblock that for later though. I think I might just actually have to... no, you know what I've got here? Actually, I might have to use my knife on that a bit later. Anyway, in the meantime, a little bit of adhesive on the back. And I'm just going to coat. And I could just want to coat this so that it goes onto my project. Round it goes. And again, I'm not being too fussy, but I just want to make sure it's all coated right, especially up to the edges, because you don't want any of the edges peeling off or peeling up, as I say, because on paper it sort of curls up, doesn't it? So all the way around. And I think this is a technique we're all quite used to. You might want to put some onto the wood as well, depending on the adhesive that you use. But just coat all the way around the letter, so it's really got a nice coat on it. I think that should be fine. I'm going to place that on top of my letter. And obviously, because you've used a wet adhesive, you've got that playtime, or I might have actually, don't know if there's a difference between the top and the bottom, but you can just position it until I think there actually is. You see that shape was probably, there probably is a different top and the bottom of the O. But rub it, oh, look at that. You see how that colour of the paint really does pop out the pretty flowers in the paper. So that's very, very nice. Now, just using that same paint, and just on the back of here, I'm just going to check that it's dry. Don't want it to be too wet, but I want to show you how I blend, because the edges, they do look nice. You could leave it like that if you choose, but actually I find that if you just take that dry paint and blend in the edges, you soften the edges of that paper into the colour of the paint around the eye, and that also adds to the 3D look of your letter. So I really like this next bit. So round that goes, all the way around the edges. So I need a bit more paint, all the way around. And again, this seems to be very in vogue. We're going back to pretty papers. We're going back to making things look like when we were younger. I quite like that. I don't know if they did this technique, though, with a kitchen sponge. I'm sure they didn't, but I think I use kitchen sponges probably more than anything else when I'm doing painting projects. I use them for everything, but I do have a lot of fun with them. So I've done that all the way around. Now, I'm just going to sit that there and take the next bit. That is going to now be positioned on here. So on the back, I now need to have some of the adhesive on the back. So I'm going to make sure that this goes all the way around, nice portion of the adhesive all the way around my letter. So this is then going to stick onto the burlap. Now I use this a bit more thicker than I've used on the paper, because obviously I want it to hold, but what's great, this actual adhesive that I'm using works really well, and when it dries it's totally clear, so even on the back it won't show. But if I position that on, you don't really need a ruler or anything, but to make sure, put your hand there, turn it over, and then with your fingers rub through to the wood so that all the adhesive comes right through the burlap, and this means that straight away your letter will adhere to the burlap. If you don't do this, it doesn't really push it down onto the burlap, and I would be concerned that you haven't really attached your letter well. So that's now almost held properly. But the last technique, I just want to add, I think the outside of the frame could stay as it is, or I could take a little bit even of the gold in there. I might actually, because I really like the gold in that letter. So I'm just going to mix a bit of the gold and my red. Let's see if we can give a little bit of lift to the outside of our frame. So just going to take that onto the outside of the frame. And that way, I've got a full frame, and I think that will lift it when it goes against the plain wall by having that additional bit of colour around the edges. Really does lift. Wow, look at this. I really like that. That's so pretty. So I've got my O, I've got my V. I'm going to have to get going. I've got an L and an E to do. But hopefully that's given you a little bit of an inspiration and an easy way to decorate a burlap frame and put some of these really trendy letters on with some nice paper and some paint. Hope you enjoyed watching this project, and see you again another time on Craft Academy.